Okay, let me read another Ilyenkov's quote at you. Labor, as a universal substance, as an activity form, here acts not only in consciousness, but in reality as that higher real genus which Aristotle couldn't see. Reduction of all occurrences to the labor as is, to the labor void of all qualitative differences, here for the first time begins to happen not only in the abstraction, in the heads of the theoreticians, but in the reality of the economic relations themselves. Value transformed into the goal for which every act of labor, everything in the labor process is done, into the activity form, into the concrete and universal law, ruling over the fate of every single object and every single individual. So this is from Ilyenkov's Concrete Unity as the unity of the opposites, little essay, which I think I already started sharing about some time ago, maybe a couple months ago, before we started reading the dialectics of the ideal. This is another amazing quote, and this is another amazing little chapter of that book, which showcases very much the Althusserian concept of the ideological institutions, which I have shared some time ago, many years ago. And even though Ilyenkov doesn't use the word ideology, and most Marxists at the time kind of avoided that word, even though Lenin used it pretty liberally, openly, or freely, if you will, the conceptualization is pretty much the same. And Ilyenkov here insists that there isn't just a singular ideal, just as I keep on mentioning for the past month or so, but he also talks about how labor itself becomes an abstraction, becomes labor as is, as this universal substance that creates everything in the human world. And Marx was right. Marx was right. Everything is done, created by human labor. Nothing just appears out of thin air. The way we transform the objects in nature or the objects of nature, this is how we replicate our life. And of course, many of you are already familiar with this because this is what I've been preaching for the past few years. But what I wanted to point your attention to today is more so the formation of the mythos. I already have a little video on Patreon about the American mythos, and I've already spoken about this on multiple occasions. But it is worth remembering that a lot of the worldwide mythos is very similar because the universal applies to every single human. This is what Hegel thought was the spirit, right? He believed that everything that is conscious, which is humans, is going to possess this universal spirit. This is why we share so much in common. But Marx pointed out how this is not something ideal. This is actually the material reality that we share. This is why our ideal is going to be very, very similar in nature, because there is so much variety where it comes to the interpretation of the objective reality around us. But when mythos is created, because remember, the logos is the rational perception of the world, and the mythos is the mystical interpretation of the world, which can be helpful, and it used to be helpful in the Aristotelian times. But Ilyenkov does point out that Aristotle couldn't understand the equity or the equality or the equation, rather, of the house and those beds, which I remember some time ago I said I would insert some pictures of those, and I didn't. So beds, they're going to be just beds for now, or bed frames. So he could not figure out how those two could be equated in the exchange process. And Ilyenkov says that is because he did not have the conceptualization of value. And the value that is only created by labor, this formula has been finalized by Marx. Many before Marx had to work very hard to provide enough knowledge and enough of a base for Marx to come up with his theory of value. And this is, of course, the only theory that time and time again proves itself to be correct. Now, and going back to mythos, so the mythical understanding of the world is based not only on superstitions, it is based on those presuppositions and those ideological constructs which we are provided with as we grow up. Just as the language dictates certain little nuances to our speech patterns, so do everything else. So do all different types of art and media and behaviors as well. So the way we consume our food, the way we put clothes on our body, the way we sleep, the way we talk to each other, all of this is dictated not by some random chance. Yes, it used to be chance maybe thousands of years ago, and then this chance manifested itself, or rather became a necessity. So people started replicating certain patterns, and not necessarily based on efficacy either. Sometimes the traditions, the customs that have long outlived their use, they remained, and we still see this to this day. But the roots of many of the ideological constructs that we currently are observing, they are very easy to find, because we have a lot of written record of the Western civilization, so to speak. So we can look at the classical German philosophy and the way that they comprehended the world. And Ilyenkov does poke fun at them rather lightly. He does, of course, consider them to be great and amazing and very much necessary in the formation of the human logos, like Kant, etc. So the way they reflected reality was very largely connected not only to the ideological institutions that existed, but also on the way that their individual personas were formed in those specific sets of material circumstances. And we can do this too. We don't have to be Ilyenkov level philosophers in order to see that in the modern day and age. So if you want an example of how I do this kind of with American mythos, again, you can go to Patreon and watch that video and comment and ask me questions if you have any. But generally speaking, when you do literary analysis, for example, of a novel or a short story even, or a poem, you will be able to see certain tropes, certain metaphors, certain symbolism. They are never accidental, almost never. Okay, sometimes, especially in the modernist and postmodernist literature, some of the authors will use like meta-irony or satire of whatever trope that it already existed. But most of the tropes and the symbols can be traced back very easily historically, and you can see a ton of research done on a lot of those tropes and stereotypes and whatnot, and you will be able to see that they still do exist, maybe in a slightly different form today. So this is why I highly recommend you continuously read not only nonfiction, but fiction as well. Because when you understand the ideal of a certain part of the population, you are able to work with it more efficiently. Remember those little sayings about how rules are meant to be broken, but before you break the rules, you have to understand the rules. Otherwise, you may actually make mistakes and make it worse for yourself and for your community at large. So learning about the tropes can really be helpful in understanding larger phenomena. So continue reading fiction. If you want any fiction recommendation, I have a ton of recommendations for English literature or American literature. American literature used to be something that I spent quite some time teaching. So if you're interested in any recommendations, let me know. And another quick reminder I want to make today is that the vast majority of our individual actions are not based on some kind of freedom of choice, some kind of free will. This is dictated by the ideal that is cultural, that is inherent to you. When you're born, you become an ideological subject. Even before you were born, Althusser argued you become a subject. And once you become an ideological subject, there's no going back. You're not going to be able to completely undo all of this. And there's nothing wrong with possessing a universal ideal. You cannot function as a human being without universal ideal. But it is best to know how to separate the useful stuff from the garbage. So this is why continuous analysis using the dialectical method is necessary. So do not spend too much time condemning yourself or others about their wrong moral choices. Instead, use this time to collectively with other people organize for a better future by reading theory together, discussing theory together, and doing all kinds of other activities that may differ depending on your geographical location and political situation at the time. So good luck to you all. Solidarity with working people of the world. I hope you have a great day today. Consider consider supporting me on Patreon. Do take care of yourself and your community first. Subscribe to me on all the other social media accounts, even though I don't do much there, and I'll talk to you sometime later.